ዝምታ ወርቅ ነው has always percuted me, if I can use that word. So ዝምታ ወርቅ ነው translates to silence is golden. And I think it's a pretty common saying as well. But that has always struck me because, is it really? And I like piercing it and kind of like, pushing,
that.
Yeah. So that's kind of always been something that stayed.
She's my a special lady. She's the only one.
Salam and hello, everyone. My name is Lily Bakada Piper, and I'm so glad that you've tuned in today. Today is World Poetry Day, and I wanted just to pause and slow down the show a little bit and talk about the beauty and power of poetry. Over the last many weeks, we have been so grateful to have so many thinkers, writers, activists, people from all across different professions join us on the show to share their stories and their passions. And as I've thought about and reflected on those episodes, to me, the one thing that's really bound so much of their work has been this creative storytelling that they are able to do about the work that they have in their hands. And when I look across the continent, we are storytellers. We are poets. It is a part of our DNA. It's a part of our culture. It's a part of who we are. I can't think of hardly any culture across this continent that's not deeply embedded in storytelling, poetry, riddles. In Ethiopia, we have this thing called teret teret yilambaret, which basically like, tell me a story, and we find that across so many cultures. We have that here in Kenya too, hadithi and Joe, right? You want to hear a story. And so to help me think about what poetry means, what it can mean, and the power and relevance it has today, I'm so very glad to have writer, poet, and playwright Christine Yohannes join me here on the show today. Christine is very many things. Her life and her work has spanned language and experiences. She is currently the senior writer for the End Fund in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, but she has spent many years at the BBC and was one of the people who helped develop the Africa Daily podcast for the BBC's Newsday program. In addition, Christine is a 2016 resident of the International Writing Program for the University of Iowa. And if you know that program, you know that it has been the home and the launching point for incredible writers from across the world. Truly an amazing accomplishment. And Christine has been the only woman that Ethiopia has represented at that program. In addition, Christine is the founder of Poetic Saturdays, a collective of poets and writers in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, who get together on Saturdays to share their written word with audiences and who have opened up that space for dozens and dozens of people for the last very many years. So I'm just so glad that Christine is here with me today. We met a few years ago in Nairobi when she was putting up her first play called Total Destruction. And since that time, she's put up a second play and has a third one coming out soon. In this conversation, we talk about her life and her work growing up in Ethiopia, the work that she's coming into next and what's on the horizon for her. And we also do talk about suicide. So I just want to mention that as a warning for anybody for which that is a difficult topic. So without further ado, please welcome to Salam and Hello, the poet, playwright, and writer, Christine Yohannes. Christine, karibu sana, enquan dena matash.
Asante sana, enquan dena koyeshin.
So
I'm
happy
grateful
to have
that
you.
I'm here. Thank you.
So happy to have you here today. Christine, I remember seeing your work kind of circulating on WhatsApp, I think, when your play was coming up. And as an Ethiopian in Nairobi, I was like, I have to go to this show. I just felt immediately proud of the work that you were doing. And the play was exceptional. And so as we start this conversation on poetry, I want to actually start with what brought you to that world, what brought you to poetry and playwriting as an art form.
That's an interesting question. So I tend to be outspoken now as an adult, but when I was a kid, I was very shy. So it's hard for people to really think of me as a shy person because I'm always like forthcoming and talking and chit-chatty and stuff. But so I needed a medium of expression. I needed a way of letting my emotions, my feelings, and 6-year-old emotions are very complex.
They're complex and many.
Yes, very complex. So I just needed a way out. And I must have been in 2nd grade when one of our teachers then, I'll never forget him, his name is Monsieur Idego. can't remember where he's from, but Monsieur Dego ended up giving us a poem to learn by heart and recite in class. And I struggled, like putting all the words together in my mind. But once I learned it by heart, and once the recitals happened, I just immediately fell in love. And I was like 6 years old.
Wow.
And I realized that, if there's a way of someone else's words, touching me that deeply, then there's a chance that I could do the same. So because I never spoke out too much, it kind of became an easy way out, like an exit mode for my thoughts and my emotions. And that's when I started writing. And it wasn't like, I don't think the words I used were, profound, but for me in that moment, it was just a medium of expression, and poetry kind of just stuck with me. And I think that, the transition towards playwriting became like, it came very naturally as well. So if you look at like old plays that we were studying like in 10th grade or 11th grade or whatever, a lot of the plays were written in poetry format, right? So prose,
sure,
or
sonnets. And,
exactly. So and that kind of triggered my love for playwriting. But it took, so that was like a dormant passion that I had that took at least 10 to 15 years to surface.
Makes sense. I mean, it sounds like poetry is shorter usually.
Yeah.
Something a 6-year-old could grasp, but then plays, you kind of grew into that art form.
Totally. And so when we were in like, I think 10th grade, there was a play that was in poetry format that I ended up being like very involved in, from putting together like a shorter part of like the script, like an excerpt of the play itself, and learning the words, putting the play together and stuff. And for some reason, I was so passionate about it, but I didn't really dive into it that much until, I think, so funny story, until 2016 December, where I was in a 10-day silent meditation, the famous Vipassana meditations.
Oh, I don't know it, but I'll take your word for it. Okay. You decided to take 10 days to be silent.
Exactly.
The child who used to be shy, but now is chitty-chatty, is taking a 10-day
Exactly, because I needed to go back to my roots.
Yes.
So I ended up taking that silent retreat mainly because I had just lost my dad in 2016, and I kind of needed time to reflect on the emotions. And interestingly, so poetry has always been a way for me to put down my emotions, but outside of one poem during that time, there was nothing else I could produce because, my dad was my best friend, and he's the one that actually encouraged me to keep writing, because like from the time I was like 6, he would be the one to pick up the little pieces of paper where I'd put down the poetry, and we'd talk about what I had put on the poems, what I meant by this or that, and kind of like a therapy session. He was pretty cool as a father. So I couldn't produce anymore, and I needed some time to kind of like reflect and put the grief,
of course,
in order, and level my emotions and stuff. So I ended up going to the 10-day silent retreat. And interestingly, what came out was not my dad's grief, but a breakup. So that's why I was saying it's a funny story. So while I was sitting there, the entire play kind of played in my head from like beginning to end. So that was like December 2016.
And was this the beginning of Total Destruction?
This is the beginning of Total Destruction.
Okay.
So that entire play, the one you saw, like from the beginning all the way up to the end, with all the actions and the words and everything, just birthed inside of me,
Yeah, pretty incredible.
And I kept it in my mind for like 5 years, where every once in a while I'd replay it, never put it down on paper, never wrote it down, but it just kept playing and replaying and replaying. And then 2021 December, so like a good 5 years later, something triggered it. And I just needed to sit down and put it down on paper.
Yeah.
and I absolutely needed to develop it, produce it, and direct it. And that's when you saw it.
And then here we are,
Yes.
here having this conversation. Thank goodness.
Yes.
I'm so glad you did, or else I don't know that we may have met. I want to visit some of the things that you said there, because I'm struck by the fact that you had parents who encouraged, or a dad who encouraged your artistic ability even as a young child. I think that's such a beautiful and tender way for a parent to encourage a child's interest, not even knowing that it might become a lifelong passion and now a part of entirety of what you do. As a young child, though, when you were writing those poems and you fell in love with it, did you see yourself as a poet? Did that become a part of your identity, or was it like, I'm Christine and this is just something I do on the side?
Those were just thoughts.
Yeah.
I don't think I even labeled it as poetry till I was maybe 13, 14, because poetry was not something that you do, like it never
Right.
really was a career option.
Right. Nobody at
especially
career
in
day
Ethiopia,
coming
no.
and saying, I'm a poet. This is how I make money. Yes.
No,
yeah.
but hopefully now I get to do that,
Yeah,
like I
absolutely.
get to go back to my old school and be like, I'm a poet, I'm a writer, I
Yeah.
actually make a living off of this and,
Yeah.
inspire
Absolutely.
others. But so it wasn't the case in my day, but I think that the moment I started identifying as a poet was it was like just a brief moment, like that transition. I don't recall it like in all the
Sure.
details, but it started with older, as a younger adult. It started with my mom asking me to read them out loud to her, and so I used to do these mini performances at home, where it was funny because my dad would prefer to read the poem, and my mom always wanted me to perform it, and she'd sit him down and be like, you have to listen to her performing it,
Maybe she saw the playwright to be, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I think she definitely did, because I remember her taking me to what we call Olympiakos, like the old, like the theater space around Arat Kilo in
Yeah.
Athos, where they used to put up children's plays. And she always used to take me and my brother there. And I didn't know that she had planted this seed even before the school did,
Yeah.
but now thinking back, I'm really grateful to have parents like that. And you're right, like they don't know what they're helping you develop,
Yeah.
but just by being there and just by being like supportive in whatever you
Definitely
do,
creating the
it
space.
completely.
Absolutely. Do you remember some of the topics of those early poems? What were you writing about?
I was definitely mad at my mom a lot. So very natural emotions,
Of course,
for
they
a
have to
teenage
get
girl.
out. They have to get out.
Yeah.
Yes.
And interestingly, like I never really wrote about love. And I still, to this day, writing about positive emotions is something I kind of struggle with. I would say that anger feeds me. At least like whenever I'm angry is when I kind of want to put my thoughts down
Yeah.
on paper, because it's either that or boxing through a wall. And
Listen, both of those are better than many
Exactly.
other things that people choose.
Exactly.
Interesting,
So, and
though.
my dad did encourage both.
Yeah.
So I did take up boxing at some point, but we're talking about
Another
poetry.
podcast.
Yes. So yeah, so that's basically how I ended up getting into poetry. And I think the real developing stage of me wanting to perform happened when I was abroad for my master's in France. So I that's where I studied at some point for like a very short period. But I had friends around me that were also like creatives on the side, so like engineers, architects, or whatever. And we had a small studio space in the boarding residence that we were at. And we would go there, of course, with like, as young adults do, with like packs of beer and, because you're a creative,
Yes,
right?
of course,
Like, yeah.
sure.
So anyway, so we would gather around and people would, use the percussion tables or the guitar or whatever. And everyone was just doing
Just
their thing in
freestyle.
in their own corners. And I went there once with like my poetry book and I just started reading there without a mic the first time. And then the second time, they brought a mic because they were like, we need to listen to the words, you know?
That's awesome.
So that's kind of how I got into like the performing side of it.
You've been lucky at many junctures to have people who have sojourned with you. I think I often think about how much we have lost when there's just simply somebody who, is teased, made fun of, not encouraged, and then that art never is born. And how beautiful that you had people along the way who kind of walked with you as you were, finding your way.
Definitely.
To bring all these
so
stuff forth.
grateful.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful.
So let's talk a little bit more about, you mentioned, spending time in France. Oh my. Sorry, listeners. That was shocking. That was my phone going off, but sorry for that,
Giving me a break to
everybody.
drink
Yes,
water.
yeah, that was what I was doing. I was helping my guest. Hopefully we can take that out in post. So let's talk a little bit about the work that you've done in terms of, let me take that again. So let's talk a little bit about your language expression. You mentioned doing your master's in France. I've read a little bit about your own reflection on the fact that you had so many languages bouncing around in your head is one thing I read that really influenced you as a writer and as a poet. So let's talk about that. What has language meant to you as a writer, as somebody who's trying to express deep emotion through words? And what language do you tend to lean into most when you're writing poetry?
Both very difficult questions to answer, but I'll try. So to answer your first question, Lily, I think that language for me has made me the human that I am. So as you mentioned, like I was exposed to multiple languages in the family. So the first language I was exposed to was French because of my dad. We have French origins on one side of the family. And then Amharic, of course, because I was born and raised in Ethiopia. My first tongue was French, though.
Okay.
So, because my dad was a French teacher and, all of that. And then Amharic came in within, the school setting as well, where I remember, I think I must have been like 4 when I was exposed to the Amharic alphabet, the Giz alphabet in Amharic when we were learning in school. And I just found it fascinating because I kept seeing animals and symbols,
it's
art. So beautiful.
Yes, it's beautiful.
And I was just fascinated, but
Yeah.
I was not really good at it at the beginning. And because it was just a lot of alphabets and letters to just memorize and learn,
And I'll just say here for those who have never seen the Giz alphabet, it is hundreds of characters. We were talking about this before the show. I think I did the math. It's like over 500 characters, 76 rows. You said times 7. So over 500 characters in our alphabet. So not the 26 letters in the, typical English alphabet here. So yeah.
So that was a lot for a 4-year-old.
That's a lot. That's a lot for anybody. That's a lot for me.
So I wasn't really good at it. And, me having gone to a French school, it was a lot easier for all of us, when we're like during break time in the compound of the school, just talking, kind of like dismissing Amharic, and everyone would, or most people would repeat things they heard in their homes, where it's like, oh, it's not even going to allow you to cross the continent. You can't even use it outside of Ethiopia. So, and things like that.
Sure.
And so I think I must have repeated one of those stupid sentences at home. And my dad sat me down for a proper, talking to because for him, language is communication. And so I don't remember the entire conversation, but I'll never forget it because that allowed me to see every language as a tool that I can utilize to speak with people and get along with people.
Absolutely.
Share food with people, just heart-to-heart conversations. Even if you don't like master the language, it's an important icebreaker just to be human with other people. So that kind of moved on to so my parents, I'm really grateful to them, by the way. I know I keep bringing them up, but they allowed us to travel from a young age. And so almost every country we went to, even if it was just for a week, we would, interact with like locals in most of the times in the local languages.
Yeah.
So I remember this one time we were in Thailand and there was this like little local restaurant we used to go to And I started learning the Thai alphabet. I don't remember it now, but
Wow.
back in the day, at
Yeah.
that time, I was like, oh, wow, I know how to read
So you're
Thai.
just
know?
drawn to the language, and lucky enough that it was
Completely.
also you're picking it up well. I've always struggled with language, but that's incredible.
I
Yeah.
think I'm just good at languages.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who says I pick up languages like a disease because if I can actually share the anecdote with you.
Sure.
So when I moved to Kenya in 2017, I had done maybe like 2-3 months, and he had lived here for 13 years. And he came to visit. We had coffee. We went somewhere in an Uber. I didn't speak Swahili then. So he went away for like a month or two and then came back. We grabbed coffee again. This time around, we're in the Uber and I'm here saying, Koshoto, tafadali, apa, all of those.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he was like, what's wrong with you? I was like, I've been here for 13 years. What's wrong with you,
That's me.
So I'm not boasting here, but
yes,
I love
yes,
language.
You are, but that's okay. We love you anyways, because there is something, language is so powerful. Like you said, I was talking to a reporter, Abdi Latif Tahir, who works for the New York Times, and he was saying that as a Kenyan Somali and the first person of African descent to have that position for the Times, now when he interviews people for the Times, he's able to get so much better stories because you sit down in somebody's kitchen and you greet them in their native tongue. Then of course they're going to have tea with you. They're going to share a story. It's so powerful.
Exactly.
So you were saying earlier that anger can sometimes inspire your poetry. Is there, of your language library that you have, is there a language that you tend to lean into first when you're starting to write poetry?
I think it depends. It really depends. I don't have a go-to language. I think English ended up being my go-to language because it kind of became a universal language, And I want my poems to be able to touch and reach as many people as possible. So I'll tend to write in English, but I write in all the languages that I speak. At least I try, except for Italian. Because I never learned Italian in school. So I can communicate with people and, grab tea and, just your basic, communication and stuff. But I don't think I'm comfortable enough to write poetry in it yet. Same, I can't do it in Swahili either. But
just a matter of time.
But yeah, so I think it really depends on what sparks that emotion,
that moment, yeah,
the where the anger stems from. But yeah, I think I've written a lot more in English, mainly because the platforms I get invited to, just like this one, for example, tend to be in English.
Yeah.
And so I tend to write more in English, but not because it's the first language that comes to my head.
Well, what you say about platforms is really important because it does remind us that if we continue to only have the English platforms, then as much as it can be far-reaching, then also who are we missing too,
True.
Because like you said, you're born and raised in Ethiopia. We share Amharic in common. I wish I could conduct this interview in Amharic, but I don't think I'm confident enough to do that, So, but speaking of poetry, why don't we hear some?
Okay.
This seems like a good time to pause and hear some of your poetry. So Christine has told us that, her poems tend to be long. So I think we're going to do half of a poem now and a little bit later as well. So Christine, why don't you introduce the poem to us and read it?
Sounds good. But before I do, could I reflect on the last thing that you just said?
Please, sure.
So in terms of like the platforms, for example, you're right. Which is why it's not a shameless plug, but that's why I created Poetic Saturdays.
Yes, we need to talk about that, please.
So
let's say more about it. No,
yeah?
let's say more. This is a perfect time. Yeah.
So when I moved back to Ethiopia after my studies, I lacked a place where my poetry could sit. So I didn't create the first poetry platform for Addis, right? And it's not the last one either. But so there was an existing Amharic only platform, which is still very famous, the Tobia Jazz poetry sessions that happen at, I think, Ras Hotel or something.
Okay.
And then there was they used to call them Jams Addis at what used to be Jams Restaurant, only in English. So for someone like me that writes in both, I either needed to choose between going on that Wednesday to one place or the Tuesday in one place or the other. And it was just, I couldn't, and at the same time, it didn't feel like my poetry or my poems would be welcome even in Amharic at the existing Amharic platforms, mainly because I'm not known as an Amharic poet or an Ethiopian poet, at least at the time. So anyway, I thought if I don't create the platform for people just like me, then I won't exist.
We'll miss it. A whole population, of course.
So when we started Poetic Saturdays, I say we because I had the idea, but of course I couldn't do it by myself. So I ended up approaching a friend of mine, Hannah Haile, and then Chris Turnbull Grimes, an American who writes in English.
Okay.
So it was the three of us. We sat down and I was like, listen, I've already spoken to a friend who's willing to give us the restaurant space. And it's ours, for as long as we need it. And why don't we just start this thing? And they were like, okay, of course, like I'm not going to fill 4 hours of, space with just my poetry. So we started with the three of us. It was hard to fill 4 hours with 3 poets. So we ended up reading back-to-back poetry. We had we were like 7 to 10 people in total in the room.
And how did you get the word out? How are you letting people know?
Just friends,
word of
and
mouth.
I think at that stage, it's hard to say we got the word out because we were only like 7 or 10 in the room.
Sure.
So we just told people, listen, we want to do this thing. Just come, have food
Yeah.
there. I mean, you have to eat anyway.
Yeah.
You have to eat anyway. So
Right.
come to that restaurant on that Saturday. And they came. And a month later, we went from like 10 people to 20-something people. And from 3 performers, we had like 7 performers. And then that Ishi restaurant, I don't think it exists anymore. The owner, Sami, was just amazing. The space just couldn't hold us anymore because we were like 50-something before we knew it. And we ended up moving to Fandika. Malaku ended up giving us the space.
Okay.
And that's also how young people started discovering Fandika,
Yes.
because the poetry space was really geared towards like the youth.
And what a fantastic space Fandika is. I mean,
Beautiful.
just so important right now.
Yeah, no, beautiful. He's done an amazing job.
Amazing.
And we collaborated for, a pretty long time with him as well. And we ended up doing it at Fandika. And I think by the 4th month, we had like 100 people, over 100 people. And we had like close to 30 people wanting to perform when we started, oh my God.
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
exactly. So when we started, I was like adamant about no entry fee, all languages welcome, all age groups welcome. We had people from like 5 years of age to 80 something attend. Some of them perform. We've had random languages like Wolof, German,
Fantastic,
Dutch,
yeah.
like it was just so
Yeah.
beautiful. We've had Yosef, a painter that paints with his mouth because of disability. So it kind of ended up being a space just for everyone, and that was the idea. Like, I love people. So it was just, everyone is welcome. Come as you are, just like the McDonald's ad,
I'm loving it.
Exactly. So it was like, come as you are. And that went on for, it's kind of still going. It's a bit dormant right now. There's a lot of poetry branches that came out of Poetic Saturdays, like Gitm Sitem, Saifa Tamam, who was like one of our main poets at Poetic Saturdays. Everyone just, and that's beautiful, seeing people empowered enough to kind of branch off and do their own thing and doing it so beautifully as well.
Definitely.
So yeah, I think
Incredible.
the platform is important. But something else I wanted to touch up on is the confidence. I think I kind of feel the same with my Italian sometimes, but it's mainly because of how other people perceive you trying to communicate in that language. And I don't think a lot of people are encouraging or empowering when it comes to languages. It's almost as if you've got to be, fluent and you can't have an accent or,
For sure.
like it's just,
It's a very judgy space.
Very judgy
Very
space.
judgy space around
and I
language.
hate that.
Yeah.
And I've had to do a lot of work on myself to kind of, break that barrier and be like, I don't care what you think, even if I'm gonna butcher this thing, I'm gonna speak it.
Good for you.
Yeah,
Good
but
for
it's
you.
still work in progress.
It is. And when it's your identity, like, if you're an Ethiopian and you're trying to speak your mother tongue, whatever of the many mother tongues we have at home, it could be, and you don't feel like you do it well. I mean, I've seen in the diaspora, my experience, a lot of people shying away from even identifying as Ethiopian or Eritrean because they didn't have a command of the language. And so it really, really is deep rooted in your identity. And so I hope that we're getting to a point where we can be more welcoming.
I hope so.
I had a recent experience with not myself, but a family member who was not able to participate in a program because it was Amharic only.
Oh, wow.
And they were just like, there's just no space for it. And I was like, that's what a shame, because she's quite excellent at what she does, and her platform in Amharic is not strong enough to have been on that show. So they're just like, well, you just can't be a part of it. And we need spaces, of course, that are language specific. And I'm not saying we should have only a space where, it's multilingual all the time. But I just think that particularly Habesha culture, there's some things we can work on around being a bit more affirming, especially in the diaspora.
For sure.
I think at home it's a bit better, but definitely in the diaspora, it runs deep.
Yeah. And I think just the basic understanding that language is just a tool you use to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that's it.
I'll tell you a funny story after you read your poem.
Okay. I'm stalling.
My fables in Amharic, yes. Excuse me. No, take your time. Let's put my thing on.
Right. So this is a favorite for a lot of people. This poem I'm about to read. I don't like titling my poems because I feel like, well, first of all, it's not as short as your regular. There's no such thing as regular poetry, but it's not. I don't write short poems.
Okay.
Because it's a lot of complex emotions that need to come out. So 1-pagers, 2-pagers,
Okay, I like it.
So and usually there's a lot in there, and I've always felt like if I title them, I'm limiting how people will perceive it, right? So I don't title them. Funny story. Again, I'm not gonna divert too much.
You're really delaying this thing.
But well, I can tell you later. But let me tell you now.
Sure.
So the first poetry collection, my first and only poetry collection, I published in 2015. It was a collection of 10 of my favorite poems at the time, and I didn't title them. And I realized that when I saw like the first prototype, the first draft, the first draft of the book, I realized that people would get confused because you wouldn't know where one poem would start and where the second one would go.
Yeah.
So I was like, and I'm not going to title these poems. I don't want to title them. So I was like, let me number them and let me color code them. So every page was a different color, just so people could find their way around the poetry book. But yeah, so this one doesn't have a title.
No title. Does it have a color?
It does. Well, no, because it's not part of the book. But right now it's black.
Okay. We'll just go with that. Black is beautiful.
Okay. Yay. Okay. So first part of this poem. My hair is not a rebel. Trust me. It sleeps when I tell it to, sits, stands, and rolls on my order. I can make it hard, thick, just as... Sorry, can I take that again?
Of course. We've asked a lot of your voice today.
Okay.
Take your time.
Yeah, this is better. My hair is not a rebel. Trust me. It sleeps when I tell it to, stands and rolls on my order. I can make it hard, thick, just as much as I can make it soft to fall on one shoulder. It does what I tell it to do whenever I tell it to do it. It is so obedient that once I give it the order, it won't change for shit. And in all honesty, sometimes it's too much to handle, so I simply let it be. It's a part of my essence, encrypted in my DNA. It's a part of being me. I stand before you today, a determined voice, not a crack in my throat, to tell you that I love my hair. Dismissing my story based on the basis of I, according to you, have good hair is not fair. This black weight on my head has a story all its own. Had it been decades ago, would have gotten me disowned. And it's not like shit's changed, because what's good fucking hair to begin with? When you tell me how nice it looks, but teach me inadvertently to contain it. My hair is not a rebel. It's an army of warriors with my ancestors' blood written on each strand. Ready to go to a war it didn't ask for, yet faithfully awaits my command. It's the forest that muffled the death of my ancestors on both sides. It beats the heart of great-grandmothers that would not be taken for free rides. It is a pack of wolves ready to take on a child as their own. It is a black panther that watches over me so I don't stand alone. It is the bear that dances with me, that guards from the cold to keep me warm. It is the calm Dead Sea collecting the souls of my ancestors for the upcoming storm. It is the vultures flying over my head pointing towards the fire. It is the night sky that boasts the full moon it doesn't retire. It is the snake, the spider, and everything in this world that is not right. It is. Can't you see it is nature in all of its might?
Ooh. I have chills. Christine. Wow. It is a panther. It is a bear. It does not leave me alone. Where did that come from?
Do you remember the imagery though?
Yeah.
From the Jungle Book in English.
Yes.
The Jungle Book. So if you remember Mowgli at some point, well, not at some point, but like he's got the wolves that took care of him. He's got the panther that's his guide and the bear that's his protector and the vultures that flew ahead when the fire had started in the forest when the tiger Shere Khan was coming. Anyway, I love animations.
So your hair is that for you.
All of that.
This shield, this companion, this protector.
The guides, the ancestors.
Yeah, the ancestors.
All of it.
That's really powerful. I just had our friend Salam on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about hair.
Yes.
So I'll have to make sure that she sees this poem. What a beautiful anthem to Black hair and Black women, and not just women, but all genders and identities, because it's so true. It is a part of who we are and roots back all the way to our ancestors.
Thank you.
I know there's more to that poem, so we'll come back and hear the rest as we go on. You know, on your YouTube channel, you have all these poems, and you do talk a little bit on there about what inspires them. You've talked about anger being sometimes a source that guides you, and we've talked about language and how much that can move you this way or that. But I'm curious, though, between all of the languages and the poetry, you know, for you, is there a part of particularly Ethiopian folklore or storytelling, or, you know, even our own riddles that are part of our culture that, you know, comes to you often, or that is kind of for you a constant inspiration or a favorite?
I'll go with favorite.
Okay.
Because, you know, my inspirations come from everywhere. In terms of folklore, I was raised by my great-grandmother. So when I say raised, of course, my parents were there.
Sure.
But my great-grandmother came to our house when I was born, and she ended up going back to her house 18 years later when I became an adult.
Wow.
So I was super, super close with her.
Yeah.
I have a poem dedicated to her in the old collection, but I'll share that with you.
Please.
So that was my source of folklore, you know, because, you know, the tarat, the fables, and so all of that was how we used to pass time. Remember, like earlier we were talking about playing in the garden with flowers and mud and all of that. And I am grateful that having been, you know, raised in a city, I had that, I want to call it, you know, village experience, because my great-grandmother was there, because my great-grandmother was a village girl, you know, and so yeah, I think that's the source of the folklore. But storytelling specifically, it's thanks to her that I got so attached to storytelling, no matter what format it takes, you know, because she always had stories to tell. And because of her, now I've got a lot of stories to tell as well, you know, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on this platform, but my mom is always shocked that, you know, teenage things, that some of my friends and I used to go home just to smoke weed with my great-grandmother, you know? And I don't think anyone can say great-grandmother, my dad's grandmother, you know?
Who knew? My mom knows this. This is not new information.
No, it's not new information. We have a very transparent relationship in the family. Everyone knows everything. It's, you know. But at the time, of course, we did it secretly.
Yes.
But she was part of those, you know, stories for me. And so thanks to her now, I'm also a storyteller, you know, and that's where it stems from. Now to answer the favorite saying, ዝምታ ወርቅ ነው has always percuted me, if I can use that word. So ዝምታ ወርቅ ነው, translates to silence is golden. And I think it's a pretty common
Yes.
saying as well. But that has always struck me because, is it really? And I like piercing it and kind of like, pushing,
Exploring that.
yeah. So that's
Mitawak,
kind of always been something that stayed.
I've never heard it in the Amharic. I only know that phrase in English. So thank you for that.
Zimitawak,
I'm going to say that to my children tonight at dinner. So let's talk a little bit about your playwriting. So we mentioned Total Destruction, which was your first play
Yes.
that put up, but then you put up a second play, No More, No Less. That was in
2022, yes.
2022. You have another play coming up. So tell us a little bit about what's happening with you in the playwriting space and what we can expect to see from you coming up soon.
Okay. So playwriting, like I mentioned earlier, is like the newest addition to my writing exploration. And it's a jungle I really like because it is a jungle. There's a lot of like industry stuff that happens that, affects you even if you don't really want to be affected by it. But I digress.
Well, I actually want to understand what you mean, though. What do you mean industry stuff? You mean it poetry? Well, what I would take from that is that poetry is a bit more singular. You can kind of control it more. It's you and the page. And now with the play, you're inviting others into your art space.
Yeah. There's that. And then, of course, there's like, industry politics, basically. Like, because there's not 10,000 spaces that you can access. And so who gets access to those spaces? And, the actors that you have on your lineup also matters.
Of course.
And just, all of that. But I'm a new playwright, so I don't think I can speak about that just yet. But it just feels like it's a lot more complex than poetry because of, the reasons you mentioned. And more importantly, I have had the pleasure of, performing on international stages through poetry because I'm just one person and, there's not like costumes or gear that you need to carry with you. So, I've been trying to take my play to Ethiopia for a year now and it's just complex. So, that's what I mean. And, apart from that though, wait, what was the question?
The question was, what's coming up next? Because you did Total Destruction.
Right, yes.
Total Destruction is the one you're trying to get to Ethiopia if you can, funding and all that permitting.
Yeah.
You put out a second play, but then you have a third one in the works?
Yes,
is that right?
Exactly. Thank you. I got lost in my thoughts
okay.
there. So the third one is on the way. We are preparing for it. The script is almost ready. I like talking about social issues, social issues that can impact the communities that we live in. So the first one, if you remember, it was about cheating, abortion, and also transparency in relationships that, in my opinion, have kind of been thrown out the window because I don't know. Anyway, so I think people should just watch the play to understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then the second one, No More, No Less, was more specifically about mental health. So in the first play, if you remember, there were allusions to
definitely.
Mental health in general. And then No More, No Less was about, what happens in people's minds. And that's something that I wanted to put out and thoughts and ideas were depicted by actors, like individual actors.
I see.
I'll make sure you watch it.
Please.
But so the reason why I wanted to do that was because I wanted to create the opportunity for people to learn to understand each other before jumping into conclusions or judging each other or dismissing each other. And this whole in my opinion, stupid cancel culture that just doesn't really make sense because, we're all like complex beings with emotions, trauma, upbringing, backgrounds, just all of that. And we can't be the same, and
for sure.
That's really what I wanted to put out there and how there can be a strain on people's mental health when you're constantly worried about what other people are going to do or what they're going to say or how they're going to perceive you, and at some point, everyone is just living for what others think.
Right, and
rather
that authenticity fades away very quickly. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's really what I wanted to touch on, the second one. And then the third one initially, I had planned to kind of dive into, the human nature of competition and sabotage and all of that, specifically within the theater industry. And while we were in the process, unfortunately, someone committed suicide. I should have given you like a heads up, sorry. But yeah. And then it made me realize that, especially because of all the conversations that were happening around it, it made me realize that's something I want to write about, because it wasn't the first person around me that I heard of or that I knew, and especially that person being a man, and the rate of male suicide kind of, tripling in the past 3-4 years in Africa, specifically in Kenya as well. I don't have the specific numbers, but I looked it up at the time, and I was like, oh, this is like significant. And I want to write about this because I feel responsible to put out work that speaks to that, so that people can be conscious enough about how this could happen and about what to do after it happens. So you can imagine that, like any death, the speculations, the gossip, it was just
But what
tumultuous.
a delicate issue, because I don't think we talk much about mental health, and we certainly don't talk much about suicide in African cultures. It's not something I think we have enough language around. So now when you're in the process of even casting and you're in the development process of that play, how are you kind of putting together the right team to handle this subject? Because I can imagine that you really need the right people to put that message out there.
Yeah.
That story.
For sure. I think the language would make it easier, because I intend on producing it in Kenya, so it's going to be in English. And I think there's enough vocabulary around it, even to be careful not to trigger people.
Yeah.
And I'm also very conscious of, what I depict in the play. So nothing visual, nothing that directly alludes to it with like sounds or within the dialogue either, because I'm trying to prevent, I'm not trying to, add on, if that makes sense.
Yes, of course.
So there's that. And then for the team, I had tried from the beginning. So from the first play, I had tried to carry the same team with me, which I did for the second play as well. And this time around, because it's such a profound subject, and it's very hard for a lot of people. And 2 of the actors stepped out, understandably.
Sure.
And I did put out the option out there. And so now I'm working with a smaller number of people, but I want to make sure that people that want to talk about this can also be a part of it. So the last 2 weeks of March, we're going to be putting out an audition, at least for 2 or 3 roles for the play.
Great.
And we're auditioning everyone. So even the team that I had is going to have to audition, just so everyone is like on a fair, starting point. So that's the plan for the last 2 weeks of March. April, we'll start rehearsals, and I won't be in Nairobi. So I've got 2 people that are going to help me with it. And last year, for the second play, we had also taken our rehearsals online, so via Zoom or, Google Meet or whatever, because
do what you got to do
timings,
these days.
exactly,
Yes.
and thank God for technology. We managed to do most of the rehearsals for the second play online, virtually.
Okay.
So I want to do the same thing now, where the team can still get together physically, because, physical get-togethers are still very important when you're trying to put out something like this. And that's that. And then April, May, preparations, costume set, action, script, all of that. And hopefully between like the 2nd or the 3rd week of June, we should be able to put something up. But we don't have a specific date, because, we're still in the starting phase. Yeah.
But where can people follow or find information? If people listening to this want to audition, where can they find that information?
Right now, we have We have an Instagram page. It's
Okay.
called The Team Tough. But the name and how the team was composed is going to change drastically.
Okay.
But I think if they follow our Instagram page, or even if they follow me,
Okay.
they can
They'll
find
find
me.
it. Okay.
Yeah,
And we'll
Christine
link that in
Yohannes.
we'll link that in the show notes. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And I think we'll be able to share all the
Awesome.
information.
No, we want to make sure people can follow up and find you and find your work.
Thank you.
As we kind of wrap up, you've been at this for a few years and have had both the experience in traditional journalism. You worked in the BBC for many years. You've now spent time creating poetry collectives, writing plays, putting together casts. Your experience has kind of spanned many different kind of writing genres. What do you say to other young people in the creative space who are starting off? Because as you said earlier, it's not yet a profession where you can ensure that you're going to have financial stability. It's not yet a
Yeah.
profession where you're going to have benefits. And yet I find that creatives typically are burning with creative energy and find it hard to go into a typical field. So what would you say to young people who are considering the creative arts or the writing sphere, and to help guide them as they start to make some of those early decisions?
I say go for it, and don't allow anyone to box you in any category or in any space. So, like you said, the different boxes I ended up ticking along my journey, I did them simultaneously. It's tiring. It's really exhausting, mainly because, like you said, the space doesn't exist for us. Right now, I am employed as a writer, and I feel like that change is slowly coming. Like,
Sure.
whether it's through, poetry, press releases, plays, or whatever I write has now space within an organization. And I think that corporate culture is also changing, that people are understanding that storytelling is very crucial.
Absolutely.
Because you can have the data, but if you're not putting it together in a way that's palatable for people to consume, then it's pointless. You
sure.
can throw as many numbers as you want. You're not going to get anywhere. So I think that the space is definitely changing, but definitely don't allow anyone to box you in. Like, I never started off as a journalist, right? Like, I had the most unconventional path to where I am today, where, I ended up going through administrative management and international trade, logistics, and then communications, marketing, PR, and then journalism, and but all the while I still held on to my pen, where I was either putting out poetry on YouTube. I don't have a lot of followers. I'm not looking for followers, but I just wanted to put my work
wanted
out
to put
there,
it out there. I think that's key, actually, for a lot of creatives. Create.
Yes, create.
First of all, just create. Keep creating. Yeah,
exactly,
absolutely.
exactly. And I sometimes get questions like, "So, are you a journalist?" I'm like, "No, I'm not a journalist. I don't think I'm a poet either, but I write. And I love writing, because lately I've been asked to introduce myself to a few people, and I'm like, I guess I write for a living and I write for fun. That's what I am.
Yeah.
But I guess, I don't know, it's just stick to it, like, if you know in your heart that that's what you want to do, don't get boxed in, just do it, put it out there, share.
Absolutely.
And also reach out, I'm not unreachable. I can be found on LinkedIn, Twitter, or whatever, and I'm happy to help whoever.
That's very kind of you. You're going to get people.
I can't wait. I can't wait. No, really, because we need more.
We do. Yeah, absolutely. There's that beautiful painting, of the man reaching over the wall, and the name of the painting is "He Ain't Heavy." Have you seen that painting?
No.
The idea is, just reach back, pull somebody along with you. So thank you for that. That's a generous way to kind of capture your advice to the next group of creatives right behind you.
Thank you.
So let's hear the rest of the poem.
Oh,
I think we
right.
have to hear the rest of the poem before we wrap this conversation. Oh, we've run out of water for you. Sorry. So maybe it's time to end the interview.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I'm good. Okay. My hair is not a rebel. I can curl, twist, braid, cornrow, and iron straight flat. I can throw up or let down, and I ain't a fucking dog that you can pat. I can put it in a bun, shorten, and even make it longer if I fucking please. So when I come with a lion's mane, don't fear it like it's some kind of disease. It ain't sick, it ain't ill, and it's sure as hell not disobedient. So don't go behind my back talking about how crazy my hair is because it ain't lenient. Easy going by whose standards, though, because I didn't get the fucking memos. You must be judging the craziness of my hair based off of Garnier and Pantene marketing demos. But listen, why should I subjugate my hair to heat to make it look clean? Mind you, I said look clean. At this point, it doesn't matter if I don't wash for weeks as long as it doesn't look mean. Why should I feel uneasy about the texture of my natural hair for your comfort? Our type of hair you de-beautify with makeover shows, Jerry Springer and Cops. Our type of hair you contort. My hair is not a rebel. It has every right to stand against the oppression you put it under. It has every right to run, flee, attack, and fight back, but never surrender, because it is a sign that it not only has a mind of its own, but a heartbeat. It bleeds each time it is scorned and refuses to be imprisoned to undergo heat, because it remembers those that have been burned alive to their difference, breathes freely for those that have been strangled, hung, and killed for their resistance. It resists in every form I make it morph into, because it's the only way it fights capitalism. It capitalizes on its ability to be okay with itself and break free from the ism. Simply put, it refuses to be named the good hair or a rebel. So it regularly trims away every single imposed label. No, my hair is not a rebel. My hair is not crazy. My hair isn't uncontainable. No, my hair is not impossible. My hair is not a petting zoo. My hair is not unstoppable. No, my hair is not resistant. My hair is not imposing. My hair is not an empty flattery. No, my hair is not a war zone. My hair is not a fight. My hair is not angry. No, my hair is not a rebel, but I'm not my hair.
That is not how I thought you were going to end. That was fantastic,
Thank
Christine.
you.
Thank you so much. Where can we find that in print? Where can we read that? Is there, other than your YouTube where you are also reading it, is there a place where it's in print where we can find it? Not yet. Let's just say not yet.
Okay, let's say not yet.
Let's say not yet. Hopefully soon. Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you. Powerful.
But you can find it on YouTube, like you
said.
Yeah,
you can find it on YouTube, and we'll make sure we link that in the show notes so people can find it. So we always ask our guests 2 questions before we let them go.
Okay.
So we did not prep you for this, but these are easy.
Should I be scared?
No. Christine, what is your favorite drink?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
See?
You got me.
See, yeah, you were nervous, but there's really no reason to be nervous.
I don't even know what to pick now.
Okay, let's hear your favorite daytime drink. Let me give it to the daytime. Before 5 p.m.
Are there rules about that?
No, but just for you, now there's a rule. There was never a rule before this episode.
Wow.
This is hard, huh?
It's very hard.
That means you like beverages. You're a beverage person?
Yeah, I'm a liquid person.
You're a liquid person.
Yeah.
More than food, you're going to be you're going to be the person with multiple beverages.
Liquids and dessert. Ooh, cake.
Ooh, okay.
You should have asked me that.
I love cake, so let's do cake. Let's do cake because I'm a cake person
too. Amazing.
Okay. Favorite cake?
Chocolate fudge.
With what kind of icing?
Chocolate.
What kind of filling?
Chocolate.
Garnish is
chocolate overload.
Through.
Chocolate overload.
Where can you find the best chocolate cake in Nairobi, would you say? Let's just say it, because
No.
I have my opinions.
No.
There's only one good chocolate cake in Nairobi.
No.
Yes.
Don't do this to me.
Yes, just say it. I'm going to tell you if you're right.
No.
I think the only good chocolate cake in Nairobi from, like, you can get it fast if you're not ordering from a caterer, is Java. The Java chocolate cake.
Yes.
It's the only one.
Yes.
It's the only one. Yeah.
I was scared to say it.
Yeah, every other place is either dry, the frosting's not right, something is
you.
off. It's
Thank
only
you.
Java.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I like it. You put a little twist on my drink question. I like it. And my last question, hopefully this is even easier than the last.
Hopefully.
What is bringing you joy?
What is?
Bringing you joy. What is bringing you joy? Today.
On a daily basis?
However you interpret it. See, this is what's wrong with having poets. They're so deep. Normal people just answer. They have a quick answer. Poets are like taking it so deep. They're taking it metaphysically.
It's hard. What is bringing me joy today?
Yes.
What is bringing me joy today? What is bringing me joy today? What is bringing me joy? This podcast. Being here, for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Without a heartbeat. I know it took me a second to answer, but
it did. But
sorry,
we can edit that out.
I needed to connect. I needed to connect with myself. But definitely today, I was really excited to be here. I technically kind of sneaked out of work. no one needs to know, but we're announcing it. So I really, really wanted to be here. And I can't wait to see and hear the final product and, just share it
Thank you, Christine.
with my mom, first and foremost, because I didn't tell her I was coming here and she'd be really pleased.
Fantastic.
She's always
Hi,
been
Mom.
a cheerleader. Yeah.
Hi, Mom. Oh, thank you for that. That's so... We're grateful because we don't take, I think time is everyone's most precious commodity.
Yeah.
So when someone gives us their time, we just feel so grateful. So if this has brought you joy, then I'm so satisfied. So thank you for that. And thank you for being here and sharing. I think I continue to be amazed at the way the arts connect us. I met you when you did your play and you were so warm, so gracious, just, open-armed. And I just continue to see that in every place that I meet you. And I just pray that open arms greet you and find you wherever you go.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you
the
so
same to
much.
you.
And I look forward to seeing this next play. So can't wait for
Thank you.
June. We'll be there in the front row.
Thank you, Lily. But thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a second
Go. So listeners, we will link to all of Christine's work in the show notes so you can find her poetry, so you can follow and maybe audition for her play and find her work. And I hope that you will celebrate World Poetry Day today with some of her work and other poets across the continent. And we would love to hear from you. So please reach out, lily@salamandhello.com or on our socials, Salam and Hello. It's simple. It's the same every time, but Salam with an E. And of course, we want you to rate and subscribe and review the show. It always really helps us out. So until we see you next time, take it easy.
Every time you smile, summer in your eyes. Don't ask me why, I'm by your side. You keep me